David Thompson forced a smile as he shook Jake Morrison's hand in the conference room of Meridian Financial Services. At 41, David had spent 7 years building client relationships and consistently hitting sales targets that other advisors could only dream of. Now he was congratulating his new boss, a 25-year-old with an MBA and exactly 0 experience in financial services. "Congratulations on the promotion," David said, his voice steady despite the bitter taste in his mouth. Jake beamed with the confidence of someone who'd never had to earn anything. "Thanks, David. I'm really excited to bring some fresh energy to the branch." Fresh energy. David almost laughed. The kid had been at Meridian for exactly 2 weeks, shadowing David on client meetings and asking questions that revealed he didn't understand the basics of retirement planning or investment management. Richard Morrison, the company's CEO and Jake's father, stood at the head of the mahogany table, looking pleased with himself. "Jake's going to revolutionize how we approach clients' services," he announced to the room full of financial advisors. "His innovative thinking and business school training are exactly what this branch needs." David nodded along with everyone else, but his mind was calculating. 7 years of 60-hour weeks, 7 years of perfect performance reviews, 7 years of being told he was management material and just needed to be patient. The branch manager position had been dangled in front of him like a carrot for 3 years, ever since the previous manager retired. "Richard's been instrumental in getting Jake oriented," he continued. "His mentorship will be invaluable as we transition into this new phase." Mentorship. David had spent 2 weeks teaching Jake how to read financial statements, explaining the difference between mutual funds and ETFs, and watching the kid take notes on concepts that should have been second nature to anyone in a management position. The meeting ended with handshakes and congratulations. David gathered his files and headed back to his desk, passing photos of clients whose portfolios he'd grown by millions over the years. The Martinez family, whose retirement he'd secured through careful planning. The Johnsons, whose college saving strategy had put 3 kids through university debt-free. The Hendersons, who trusted him with their life savings because he'd proven himself reliable for 6 years running. All of them would now report to Jake Morrison, whose biggest achievement was being born to the right father. David sat at his desk and opened his laptop. His quarterly numbers stared back at him. $2.8 million in new assets under management, 15% above target. Again, just like every quarter for the past 4 years. He'd built this branch's reputation, one client relationship at a time, while Jake had been studying theoretical business models in graduate school. His phone buzzed, a text from his ex-wife Sarah about their daughter Emma's soccer tournament next weekend. "Can you make it to the 2 p.m. game? She really wants you there." He smiled for the first time all day. At least some things in his life still made sense. The breaking point came 3 weeks later, during a client meeting that should have been routine. Mrs. Eleanor Watson, 73 years old with a $1.2 million portfolio that David had been managing for 5 years, sat across from Jake's desk, looking confused and concerned. "I don't understand," she was saying. "You're telling me I should move everything into cryptocurrency, but David always said diversification was important." David stood behind Jake, watching his new boss fumble through an explanation that made no financial sense. Jake had apparently attended some conference about disruptive investment strategies and decided to revolutionize Mrs. Watson's conservative retirement portfolio. "The blockchain represents the future of wealth building," Jake said, using buzzwords like weapons. "Traditional portfolios are outdated. We need to think outside the box." Mrs. Watson looked terrified. "But what about my monthly income? I need that money to live on." David cleared his throat. "Jake, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" They stepped into the hallway. David kept his voice low and professional. "Mrs. Watson is 73 years old. Her portfolio is designed for capital preservation and steady income. Cryptocurrency is completely inappropriate for her risk tolerance. Jake's face flushed red. I'm the branch manager, David. I make the strategic decisions now. Strategic decisions should be based on client needs, not conference presentations. Are you questioning my authority? David looked at this kid who'd been handed everything he'd worked 7 years to earn. I'm questioning your judgment. Jake's voice rose. Maybe you're just resistant to change. Maybe that's why you never got promoted. The words hung in the hallway like smoke. David felt something cold settle in his chest, not anger, but clarity. Perfect, crystalline clarity about exactly where he stood in this company. You're right, David said quietly. I am resistant to change, especially changes that hurt clients. He walked back into the meeting room, sat down across from Mrs. Watson, and spent 20 minutes explaining why her current portfolio strategy was sound and appropriate for her situation. Jake stood in the doorway, fuming but not interrupting. After Mrs. Watson left, her portfolio unchanged and her confidence restored, Jake cornered David by the copy machine. Don't ever undermine me like that again, he hissed. I won't have to, David replied. He walked back to his desk, opened his laptop, and began typing his resignation letter. That evening, David sat in his apartment reviewing 7 years of client files. The Hendersons trusted him with their retirement planning. The Martinez family called him directly when they had questions. The Johnsons sent him Christmas cards every year. These relationships weren't just business. They were built on years of competent, caring service. Jake Morrison might have the title, but he didn't have what mattered most, the client's trust. David's phone rang. The caller ID showed Henderson Robert. David, I hope I'm not calling too late. Bob Henderson said, Margaret and I just got a letter from your company about some changes in management. Is everything all right? There have been some organizational changes, David said carefully. This new manager, Jake Morrison, do you know him? Because we've been working with you for 6 years, and we trust you completely. If there's going to be someone else involved in our planning. David made a decision that would change everything. Bob, let me ask you something. If I were to leave Meridian, would you and Margaret be interested in continuing our working relationship elsewhere? Silence on the line. Then, David, are you telling me you're thinking of leaving? I'm exploring options. Well, hell yes, we'd follow you. You've taken care of us better than any financial advisor we've ever worked with. Where you go, we go. David smiled. Let me make some calls. I'll be in touch. 6 months later, David sat in his new office at Sterling Wealth Management, reviewing the quarterly reports that told a story of perfect justice. His client roster had grown to $8.4 million in assets under management, including 12 families who'd followed him from Meridian Financial Services. His assistant knocked on the door. David, there's a call for you. Richard Morrison from Meridian. David picked up the phone, curious about what his former CEO wanted after 6 months of silence. David, Richard's voice was strained, lacking its usual arrogance. I think we need to talk. What can I do for you, Richard? It's about the client losses we've experienced since you left. The board is asking questions, and I need to understand exactly what happened. David leaned back in his chair. What happened is that you promoted your son to a position he wasn't qualified for, and clients noticed. Jake's doing fine, he just needs time to develop his management style. How much time? Because from what I hear, you've lost $4.2 million in assets under management in the past 6 months. Silence on the line. Then, some of those clients followed you. That's a violation of your non-compete agreement. David had been expecting this. Richard, I didn't solicit anyone. Clients called me asking about continuing our professional relationship. I informed them that I was no longer with Meridian and provided them with my new contact information. That's completely legal and ethical. You knew they would follow you. I knew they trusted me. There's a difference." Richard's voice got harder. "This isn't over, David. We'll see you in court if necessary." "Actually, it is over," David replied calmly. "Your son drove away good clients by offering inappropriate advice. Your branch is struggling because competent financial planning matters more than family connections. And I'm building something better with people who value experience over nepotism." He hung up and looked out his window at the city below. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad, I got an A on my math test. Thanks for helping me study." David smiled. Some things were worth more than any promotion or title, like knowing you'd earned your success honestly and that your daughter was proud of her father's integrity. 3 months later, Jake Morrison was quietly transferred to a different division at Meridian. Richard Morrison faced a board investigation into the branch's declining performance. Sterling Wealth Management announced the opening of a new branch office, with David Thompson as regional director. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's simply being excellent at what you do, treating people with respect, and letting competence speak louder than connections. The clients who mattered recognized the difference, and they voted with their wallets.